Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Historical Accounts. And today we are going to be looking at Dr. Mary Walker, who, among many things, has the distinction of being the first and only woman to receive the Medal of Honor. Now, even without the Medal of Honor, her place in history should be noted. So let's go ahead and get started looking at Dr. Mary Walker. Now, Mary was born in Oswego, New York, and she was actually born into a very unique situation. Her family came from a group known as the Freethinkers. And they had very radically different thought processes at the time. Because of this, she was raised very progressive. And she was actually an extremely educated woman. And she would eventually attend Syracuse Medical College, now known as State University of New York, Upstate Medical University, where not only did she graduate with honors, but was actually the only woman to graduate in her class. And that same year she graduated, she actually married her husband, a fellow medical student. And they actually set up a medical practice together in Rome, New York. However, due to the fact that a woman doctor was so incredibly rare, their medical practice actually had a horrible time trying to get going. And Mary would actually spend the next several years trying to make her medical practice a success. However, the outbreak of the American Civil War would completely change this for Mary. Now, at the outbreak of the Civil War, Mary actually volunteered to serve. And, of course, she was immediately rejected because she was a woman. Instead, of course, she was offered the job of a nurse, which was primarily filled by women at the time. She rejected this, and then she ended up volunteering to be a surgeon for the Union Army. And, of course, because she was a woman, she was actually initially put to work as a nurse. And it is during this time that she's actually at the First Battle of Bull Run. She ends up being at the Battle of Manassas and ends up working at the Patent Office Hospital in Washington, D.C. And she finally gets to start using some of her surgeon skills at the Battle of Fredericksburg and at the Battle of Chickamauga as an unpaid surgeon, meaning she was doing all this work for free just so that she could get people to understand that she was qualified to do the job. And it's roughly around this time that she brings the attention to the media the story of Frances Hook, who was a Union soldier who was discovered to actually be a woman. And as Mary was a suffragist, she truly believed that women should have a role in military service, an idea that was completely foreign in the 1800s. In 1862, she actually ended up writing to the War Department, asking them to utilize her as a spy, which they ended up declining, and instead she ended up joining the Army of Cumberland, where she would become the first woman to be employed as a U.S. Army surgeon. It was during her time working with the Army of Cumberland that she actually earned her Medal of Honor. Now, Mary actually received her Medal of Honor kind of in contrast to what we would typically think for someone getting the Medal of Honor. And she actually received it for her actions of bravery in regard to the fact that she would frequently go across enemy lines in order to treat wounded soldiers and civilians. And she wouldn't do this once or twice. She would just do this frequently. And there's some talk of that actually the men who were supposed to be protecting her wouldn't do this out of fear of being captured or killed. So she did this all alone. And on one of her many outings, Mary would actually end up being captured by Confederate forces in 1864 and sent to the Castle Thunder prison. And this was actually in part because she was accused of being a spy. She would actually remain in prison for over 4 months until she would be exchanged for a Confederate surgeon. Now, after the war, Mary would go on to be a writer, a lecturer, and she would address issues such as health care, temperance movement, women's rights, and even dress reform. And she would actually continue doing this for pretty much the rest of her life. Now, how she got her Medal of Honor is actually rather interesting, because it was mostly due to her own work. After the Civil War, Mary sought to try and get some sort of compensation or a commission to prove her service during the American Civil War. And President at the time, Andrew Johnson, actually kind of looked into the legality of this because they really didn't know if they could actually grant a commission to a woman. And they actually looked into the Army Judge Advocate's opinion on this, and he found no precedence for giving a commission to a woman. However, what they could find was a commendatory acknowledgement of service, and that they could give this in lieu of a commission. And so it was actually President Andrew Johnson himself who would actually pin Mary's Medal of Honor on her in recognition of her service during the American Civil War. And by all accounts, Mary was extremely happy to at least receive this proof of her service and the acknowledgement of her service. However, in 1917, she becomes victim of the Medal of Honor Board. Now, the Medal of Honor Board was actually established to review previous Medal of Honor recipients and to see if them receiving the Medal of Honor violated laws created in regards to the Medal of Honor in 1862, 63, and 1904. And unfortunately for Mary, it was ruled that she violated 3 parts of it. 1, she was a civilian. 2, she was a surgeon. And 3, she was not a commissioned officer. So in 1917, Mary would be part of the 931 recipients of the Medal of Honor that would all have their medals removed from them. However, they weren't forced to surrender it. They just couldn't be acknowledged for receiving the Medal of Honor. And sadly, Mary would actually pass away just 2 years after this. But thankfully, in 1977, the Army's Assistant Secretary of Manpower and Reserve Affairs, which was acting on behalf of the Board of Military Corrections, recommended for the reinstatement of Dr. Walker's Medal of Honor. And so she was posthumously reinstated as a Medal of Honor recipient. But there you have it, a look at Dr. Mary Walker, the first and only woman to receive the Medal of Honor. She did this in a really non-traditional way to receive a Medal of Honor, but it's truly a fascinating story about this woman who constantly kind of pushed the barrier of the time period. But that's it for today. I thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you all on the next time.